the word in Arabic, wajada, means to find, but it also means to become ecstatic. And when we talk about God's existence, it's actually in the Arabic language, it's called wujudullah. It's not kiyanullah. The attribute that we give to Allah in our theology is wujud. Yajibu lillahi al-wujudu. So he's wajib al-wujud. So wujud is findability. It's that which can be found. And so it's the human being that has to set out. So when you think about the fate of nations, nations always begin with an immense amount of energy, and there's a reason why they're given tamkeen. There's no nation that's ever been perfect. Even as close as perfection can come is the city-state of Medina. And it had hypocrites, it had fornicators, it had wine bibbers. It wasn't utopia, but it was as close as you could get in human history to what Al-Farabi called Al-Madina Al-Fadila, the virtuous city. In any case, one of the things about presidents, not the ones lately, but traditionally, they always told the truth when they left office. And that's why, and there's actually a book of farewell addresses of presidents from the US. It's actually worth reading. One of the most interesting farewell addresses was that of Eisenhower. And Eisenhower was somebody who led probably the most powerful army in human history at the time. And his farewell address is a warning about this military-industrial complex, because he recognized how dangerous it was. He recognized how dangerous it was for the economy, because an economy that's built on war is not a good economy. But he also was very, very concerned about preemptive strikes, which he considered immoral. And he also considered them unconstitutional, because in the Constitution of the United States, which is the foundation of every constitution today, even the Iranian Constitution, if you look at it, it's based on the American Constitution. So it's an extraordinary document, and there's been some really interesting research on that document by Arab scholars that have done comparative studies of the Dustur al-Amriki or Sharia. In any case, he considered it immoral because only the Congress can declare war, and a preemptive strike is only works if the enemy doesn't know about it. So if you're having a debate in Congress about a preemptive strike and then they vote for it, it's not going to work militarily. But he also considered it immoral because he said that they have not attacked you. Even if you think they're going to attack you, they haven't done it. And people can change their mind. And you can have diplomacy, and you can negotiate, and you can do these things. And so once you make that point, and von Clausewitz, who wrote On War, which is still studied, he said the nature of war is to escalate. They always think it's going to be 2 weeks. World War I, they thought it was going to be 2 weeks. In the beginning of the Civil War, they went out on picnics to watch the battles. They literally went out with picnic baskets and set them up to watch the battles. And that's why, the Arabs, they say, awwal al-harb al-kalam, war begins with words. Because you start saber rattling, very dangerous thing to do. So in this farewell address, Washington says some very interesting things. He says that of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. In other words, religion and morality. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life? These are the maqasid in our deen. These are the maqasid of the sharia. Where is the security for property? Hifd al-mal. For the reputation, al-ird. For life, haya, for life. These are our maqasid. If the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths, which are the instruments of the investigation in courts of justice. You swear an oath, if you don't have honest people, oath's meaningless. And let us, with caution, indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Because that was an idea that was beginning to take hold, this idea of secular morality. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on the minds of peculiar structure, reason, and experience, both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. So no matter how educated a person is, if you exclude the religious elements in their character development, it's going to be precarious. And then it is substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. The rule indeed extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundation of the fabric of virtue and morality? If you want your government, no government, إِنَّمَا الْأُمُرُ أَخْلَاقُ مَا بَقِيَتْ فَإِنْهُمُ ذَهَبَتْ أَخْلَاقُهُمْ ذَهَبُ. That's as true as any poet has ever said, that nations remain as long as their virtue remains. And when their virtue goes, the nation goes with it. I mean, these are truths of history. Anyway, it's worth reading. He goes on, but the one I wanted to read, because he talks about taxes and other things. But he says something very important. He says that the nation which indulges towards another an habitual hatred or an habitual fondness is in some degree a slave. It is a slave to its animosity or to its affection, either of which is sufficient to lead it astray from its duty and its interest. Antipathy in one nation against another disposes each more readily to offer insult and injury, to lay hold of slight causes of umbrage, and to be haughty and intractable when accidental or trifling occasions of dispute occur. Hence, frequent collisions, obstinate, envenomed, and bloody contests. The nation, prompted by ill will and resentment, sometimes impels to war the government, contrary to the best calculations of policy. The government sometimes participates in the national propensity and adopts through passion what reason would reject. So you get riled up and you lose your reason, and people just suddenly become angry and belligerent, and they want war. And there's a type of bloodlust that goes with war. At other times, it makes the animosity of the nation subservient to projects of hostility instigated by pride, ambition, and other sinister and pernicious motives. The peace, often sometimes perhaps the liberty of nations, has been the victim. So likewise, a passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favorite nation, facilitating the illusion of an imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one the enmities of the other, betrays the former into a participation in the quarrels and wars of the latter without adequate inducement or justification. It leads also to concessions to the favorite nation of privileges denied to others, which is apt doubly to injure the nation making the concessions by unnecessarily parting with what ought to have been retained, and by exciting jealousy, ill will, and a disposition to retaliate in the parties from whom equal privileges are withheld. And it gives to ambitious, corrupted, or deluded citizens who devote themselves to the favorite nation facility to betray or sacrifice the interests of their own country with odium, sometimes even with popularity. Gilding with the appearances of a virtuous sense of obligation, a commendable deference for public opinion, or a laudable zeal for public good, the base or foolish compliances of ambition, corruption, or infatuation. As avenues to foreign influence in innumerable ways, such attachments are particularly alarming to the truly enlightened and independent patriot. How many opportunities do they afford to tamper with domestic factions, to practice the arts of seduction, to mislead public opinion, to influence or awe the public councils? Such an attachment of a small or weak towards a great and powerful nation dooms the former to be the satellite of the latter against the insidious wiles of foreign influence. I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. But that jealousy, to be useful, must be impartial, else it becomes the instrument of the very influence to be avoided, instead of a defense against it. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those whom they actuate to see danger only on one side, and serve to veil even the second, the arts of influence, on the other. Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interests. Amazing. It's really amazing. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. So far as we have already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect faith. Here, let us stop. Europe has a set of primary interests, which to us have none, or a very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics or the ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships or enmities. Our detached and distant situation invites and enables us to pursue a different course. He didn't want a standing army. He didn't want the budget to go into the military. He wanted it for the common weal. Anyway, the whole address is worth reading, but it's very interesting. Also, I mean, look at the language, and he was the dumb founding father. Like, he was the one that wasn't considered the bright one. I mean, I won't say he was dumb, but he wasn't considered one of the intellectuals among them, like Jefferson or Adams. He was more of a warrior. And Hamilton probably helped him quite a bit on that speech, because he was his lieutenant. In any case, that's it. You have foreign attachments. So we're all just, looking at this in just, I think just the continued grief. This is 500 years it's been going on. And I really recommend everybody read William Polk's book on crusade and jihad, because it's all in there. This has been going on for 500 years. The Prophet ﷺ warned us about this. And it's just amazing, because there's just a lot of human suffering. And I don't think anybody should be in any way, no Muslim today in their right mind should be ashamed of being anti-war, because the toll of human suffering is so unbelievable. I mean, those 165 little girls, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنبٍ قُتِلَتْ, and they are maw'uda, buried under rubble. Like, what sin did they do? And for the kind of joy that you see in some of these people, you just wonder, like, where did they grow up? Like, what kind of parents did they have? Where's your heart? It's just really strange to see that. Even people happy to see, like, the Gulf states, oh, they're getting their comeuppance. It's like, these are just people living there. You can hate the rulers, whatever, but it's just people. People that in normal circumstances you'd pray next to, they might invite you back to their house for iftar. How can anybody be happy about war or bombardment? And that's called shamata. It's a very low thing with the Arabs. The Germans call it Schadenfreude. We needed to go to Germany to get that word. Shamata. It's like the joy you feel at the misfortunes of other people. It's a very low thing. Even Harun asked his brother, don't let my enemies, when he's pulling his beard, don't let them rejoice in seeing me like this. So, if you look at the Qur'an, the fate of nations is a very important theme. And there are many, many nations destroyed in the Qur'an. I mean, obviously Nuh alayhi salam. This is the first major. But the one that reminds me most of the current situation is Ad. Ad is the one that Hud went to. Salih went to Thamud. These are ancient Arab peoples. And it's very interesting because they said, Man ashadu minna quwwa, like, who has more power than we? Like, who's more powerful than us? That was their boast. And Allah said, the one who created the heavens and the earth. Did you ever think about that? But they were just arrogant because they were so powerful, and they just did not think anybody could harm them. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them, and they're mentioned, they're 24 times in the Qur'an, they're mentioned. So there's quite a few mentions of Ad. And Hud, obviously, there's a chapter named after Hud, alayhi salam. But Allah says, كَذَّبَتْ عَادٌ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Ad denied the messengers, rejected the messengers. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُمْ Hud. When their brother Hud said to them, أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ? Will you not have taqwa? Will you not be aware of God? Have some fear in your hearts? إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ. And this is what the messengers say. I'm a messenger who's trustworthy. What I'm telling you, I'm giving you advice. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ. So have this taqwa of Allah, have this awareness of God, and then obey the messenger who's going to tell you what Allah wants from you. And then he says, وَمَا أَسَرُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ. I'm not asking any reward. إِنْ أَجْرِي إِلَّا عَلَى رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. My reward is with the Lord of the worlds. And this is one of the signs of people that are on haqq. They're not out for money. They're not out for material gain. Once you see like these gospel, prosperity gospel, how the Quranic secrets of making lots of money. You know. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, somebody said that he loved him, and he said, then get ready for poverty, because poverty comes upon people that love me like a flood comes down. فقراء ما لذة العيش إلا في صحبة الفقراء. Subhanallah. Different maqayis, different way of measuring things. So now listen, this is very interesting. أَتَبْنُونَ بِكُلِّ رِعٍ آيَةٍ تَعْبَثُونَ. Do you build like these landmarks on every high place to amuse yourselves? Because it's always, really wealthy people like to live on high places. Like they like to live at the top of like towers. You know? They like, it's called the penthouse apartment, because they like to look down. Right? They're at the top. So there's a place called Davos. Do you know Davos? So I went there I was with the Saudi delegation there. One of the Saudi business people who wanted me to explain to these people Islam and believe it or not, and I'm not exaggerating, I actually read the farewell address, that section, to the entire Davos. They were very upset about it. I felt like a character in a Frank Capra film, you know. But one of the Brits came up to me afterwards. He said, you know, that was fascinating. Like, we don't really know American history like that, but he gave some really good advice, but you went on too long. It's like, why do we have these problems? You know, a bit of wind comes across the ocean. Hard rain falls upon the sea. If terror comes without a warning, there must be something we don't see. What fire begets this fire? Like a torch thrown onto straw. If no one asks, then no one answers. That's how every empire falls. You know, I went to Glide Memorial right after 9/11, and we heard that minister, he's a black minister, amazing, really powerful speaker at Glide Memorial. And all the Pelosi was there, and like all the top Democratic people were there, ready to hear. And he said something really interesting, and they actually walked out. They all walked out. He said, when I was a young boy, and I'm not going to do justice to how powerful he said it, and nobody can do a sermon like a good Baptist preacher. But he said, when I was a young boy, you know, I would come into my mama and cry and tell her, you know, my brother hit me. And she would always say, what did you do to him? And he said, that's a question we have to ask ourselves. Did we do anything that would make people want to do something to us? And if no one asks, then no one answers. Yeah. Like if you're not going to ask the questions, why do they hate us? When you actually look at it, most Muslims don't hate, they certainly don't hate Americans. I know the Iranians don't hate Americans. They just don't like getting bombed. People don't like getting bombed. If you bomb people, you will upset them. People don't like getting their land stolen. People nobody likes somebody, they come to your house, hey, you're out of here. This is my house. Not anymore. Why? 3,000 years ago, somebody promised it to me. Really? Who? God. Do you have that in writing? La ilaha illallah. These are old stories. I was with Shaykh, and he was giving some advice to these people about the problem in northern Nigeria, and he said, when I was a young man, this was the same issue. It's about pastoralists and the farmers. And if you don't understand the history, you're not going to understand how to deal with this problem. If you don't understand why the Palestinians are upset, if you just want to ignore people that have been living there, and most of them are actually converts to Islam. Muslims, wherever they went, when they didn't have large numbers of people, it was the inhabitants of the country. And over time, they became Muslim. Many of them were Christians. They were Jews who'd converted to Christianity. And then there were Jews who converted to Islam. That's the reality of it, because the DNA is the same DNA of the people there. In the Palestinian Arabic, there's all these words that they have that are local words. They're not from somewhere else. And then Palestine itself is an ancient word, Pilist. It was an Assyrian word for that area. So it's not something the Romans took it from an already existing word. Israel's the name of a prophet. It's not the name of a land. It's the name of a prophet. You know, they like to be up on the hill. They like to look down, and see the ants down below. But the ants down below look up and they see ants up above. So it's all perspective. But then this is very, وَتَتَّخِذُونَ مَصَانِعَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَخْلُدُونَ. You take masani' in hopes that they will make you eternal. Now, what's very interesting to me, the thing about the Qur'an is, the Qur'an cannot be limited to time. It's beyond any single time or space. Even though this is talking about Ad, and it's using the Arabic language. And Ad was a group in Bil-Ahqaf. They were in a place near Oman and Hadramaut. And so that's all real. But these are archetypes. And that's what you have to understand about the Qur'an. The Qur'an is sacred history. One of the things Dr. Khalid Blankenship told me is, he said, all of the history of the Qur'an is ahistorical. A historian cannot ascertain with any absolute proof, because that's not important from the message of the Qur'an. The Qur'an is talking to us in our time. And the Qur'an is talking about people that build on high places. This is an archetype. It's people that want to distinguish themselves from other people. They choose these places. Ta'bathuna, and it's abath. There's no real purpose to it, because their lives are about the accumulation. Al-hakumu takathuru hatta zuttum al-maqabir. Their lives are about the accumulation of wealth and more and more. But then Allah says, and you get for yourselves masani'. And now masna' in the Arabic language, in modern Arabic, masna' means factory. That's what it means, masani'. All of the mufassirun, they say, masani' here means qusur or hiyad al-ma'. Qusur, like you're building these. But masna' is the place of sina'a. It's the place where you're, like a data center is like a masna' that's creating this product, the data. It's where you make things. That's what a factory is. And that's what they're building these factories. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَخْلُدُونَ. That perhaps you might dwell forever. Like these people that want to upload their consciousness into these data centers so that they can live forever. I mean, I'm not making this up. You read some of their ideas. And then, وَإِذَا بَطَّشْتُمْ بَطَّشْتُمْ جَبَّارِينَ. When you exert your strong hand, you do it like men of absolute power. There's a one of the fascinating things about the Iranians, and they're dealing with a civilization that's very old, very wise. I mean, if they knew what these Ayatollahs knew, just what they walk around with in their heads. If they knew, they have no idea. I mean, these people they can teach, most of them, I mean, one of the Ayatollahs that I met, Aravani, we started talking, and he was a doctor as well, and I said, what'd you do your PhD? And he said, Jacques Maritain, in neo-Thomistic philosophy. It's like, wow. People don't know that they study Heidegger, They study. I mean, they're very serious scholars. Their supreme leader had a majlis of poets, but they would come in and then he would critique the poetry. Right? Persian poetry, they're very proud of their poetry. I mean, these are really amazing civilization. And much of our scholarship is from Persia. Much of our spirituality is from Persia. The word firdaus is probably a Persian word. They're ancient people. And the Prophet ﷺ said, لو كان العلم بالثريا لناله رجال من سلمان. If there was knowledge on Pleiades, the Persians would have got there. Because they love knowledge. And they're very, very educated people. I mean, even in this country, top doctors, engineers, many things. And it's a tragedy. This whole thing is it's a tragedy. وَإِذَا بَطَّشْتُمْ بَطَّشْتُمْ جَبَّارِينَ. But it doesn't last. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ. He's warning them. وَاتَّقُوا الَّذِي أَمَدَّكُمْ بِمَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And have the fear of the one who bestowed on you all that you know. All these gifts that you have. Who gave you this power? Who gave you all these things? These are all tests. It's all tests. Allah gives people power and tests them. But the fate of nations is real, and I wanted to look at a few things here about the fate of nations, because one of the books, and I wish it was, because I wanted to read this book with the people in my book club, but the copy I have is very old, and it hasn't been reprinted, and it's very hard to get. But Sir John Glubb, who was a very interesting British officer and also a military historian, he initially was in Iraq with the British government, but he actually left the British government and became part of the Iraqi government. And they ended up becoming part of the Jordanian government, and he actually trained the Jordanian army and was very, very devoted to I think he felt what was done to the Arabs was just wrong, what England had done. But anyway, he wrote this book called The Fate of Empires. And he said, so he studied all these different empires, the Assyrian, the Persian, the Greek, the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, the Arab Empire, the Mamluk Empire, the Ottoman Empire, Spain, Romanov Russia, and then Britain. And what he found is the duration of empires is almost to the year 250 years. That's what he found. And he just said it was very consistent. Now Ibn Khaldun says the same thing. Ibn Khaldun says you have, the first generation, which is like about 80 years. The first generation is very amazing. Just a lot of energy, great courage, a lot of sacrifice, you see. And then the next generation, they reap all the benefits of that generation, but they keep it going. The third generation is the one that destroys it. Right? So that's about 240 years. So when you look at this country, and you just see the greed, and the greed goes all the way down. The greed is not just, we can point the fingers at the 1%, but just look at all the fraud. There's so much fraud in this country. There's insurance fraud. All these car mechanics ripping people off, doctors, insurance fraud, dentists. You just see there's so much. People have just lost their way morally. And that's a great problem, because it's very difficult to restore that. And you cannot do it without a religious revival. And the religion can't be a false religion. It can't be based on prosperity gospel. I mean, I had, last night, I got a call from one of the evangelical ministers, because they're very troubled by what's happening, the good ones. I mean, some of them, they're happy as pie. It's amazing. I mean, I don't know where they find Jesus in aerial bombardment. I just do not understand that. I mean, especially killing innocent civilian women and children. Like, I just don't imagine that. I mean, he's the Prince of Peace. He's the one who said, if you take up the sword, you die by the sword. If you harm one of these little ones, better for a millstone to be wrapped around your neck and you thrown into the ocean, drowned, than that you should harm a child. I mean, that's the Jesus I grew up with. I don't know what Jesus they're talking about. Turn the other cheek, love your enemies. Wasn't that Jesus? Because that's in our tradition. Those are all true. We don't deny that aspect of Isa. The Prophet ﷺ is between the two. He's between Moses and Isa. His Sharia is between the two. It's called the middle way. You can forego and forgive. That's the way of Isa. And the Prophet actually preferred that. Or you can ask for justice. That's the way of Moses. Sharia gives you the choice. You can forgive people. Even if somebody kills, if it's not Islam differentiates between a community murder and personal murders. In a personal murder, the family can forgive the person that murdered them. It's amazing. Because it's not a threat to the society. So they can actually forgive them. Whereas if somebody is like a brigand or a highway robber or armed robbery, that's a threat to everybody. So that nobody has the authority that you implement the had punishment in that situation. In any case, he looked at these and then he identified certain things. So the first one, he called it the outburst. And he said that basically there's this immense energy of the early people. They have this incredible energy, and you see it consistently. Like he shows again and again. And then he said, then they have a lot of conquest. It tends to be there's conquest. These are sunan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is just part of our species. You have conquest, like the Arabs just, mashallah, in such a short time. They were in Morocco, Uqba ibn Nafi'. And amazing things, the things that they saw and did. I mean, they say when Uqba arrived to the Pacific Ocean, he took his horse out. And he said, Wallahi, if I knew there was land beyond this, I'd build ships to take Allah's deen to them. Like, he didn't know there was America. But that's himmah. Like, that was the immense himmah that these people had. And then the traders, these amazing traders that went to southern India. And they asked for fair prices. And people couldn't understand, why aren't they greedy like our merchants? And these aren't fairy tales. These are real. These are the realities. This is how this religion spread. It spread because of righteous people that embodied the religion, and they were clean, and they spoke beautifully, and they dressed well, and people wanted to be like them. And the Ummah, the Arabs, they say, أصبحت كنتيا وأصبحت عاجنا وشر خصال المرء كنت وعاجن. The Arab poet, he said, I've become a kuntian. Kuntu is I did and I was, and it's like an old person, because no future. Aristotle said old people always talk about the past because they don't have a future. He said young people always talk about the future because they don't have a past. So he said, وَأَصْبَحْتُ عَاجِنًا. And عَجِنَ الرَّجُلِ, it means he can't get up without relying on the floor. And so it's a kind of ajiz. And so the ummah, this is part of the nature of the the curvilinear nature of time, which the Muslims placed on that. The life of man, the nights and days of man, and it's curvilinear. We reach our peak. It's around 49 according to Aristotle. So, and then he says you have the commercial expansion where they trade and they build all these, and then comes the age of commerce. So they begin to, they have all this prosperity, but then it's followed by the age of luxury. They become decadent, and they become, just interested in all the, but they're still strong. It's still strong. The age of luxury is followed by the age of affluence. Money becomes the thing that people are after. In the early period of a civilization, the young people are more interested in honor. They want to do things where there's honor in them. Like a soldier who goes out, and wants to defend the homeland, things like that. And then he says they move into this age of intellect, where you have a lot of academia, and they have a lot of think tanks. And what he says about these, the problem with the age of the age of the intellect, is they think all their problems can be solved by thinking, not by sacrifice, not by doing the things that are necessary. Like, you want to solve the global crises, but nobody wants to give up driving cars. Nobody wants to solve the problem of hunger by eating less and making sure other people get what they need. And then finally he just says it moves into a kind of just real decadence where they lose their morality. Religion is in serious decline. He said it becomes a community of selfish and idle people. Internal quarrels develop, division about the division of its dwindling wealth, and then pessimism sets in. And so people, some of them, their response to it is to drown in sensuality and frivolity. So these are sunan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His creation. And they're very real, and I mean, we have to pray and ask Allah to make us amongst the ulu baqiyya. Because in Surah Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that there's a group called ulu baqiyya. And these are the people that cling to the virtues of a civilization when it was on its ascent, when it's on its decline, according to Imam Badawi. They're the people that are still honest. They're still upright. And they become an anomaly amongst the people. It's a bad time when you say, oh, he's an honest man. That's a bad time. In a good times, it's like, watch out, he's a dishonest man. That should be the norm. It's your warning about dishonesty, not your praising honesty, because honesty shouldn't be praised. It's just the way people should behave. It's bad times. In any case, the Prophet ﷺ told us all these things, and so there's a great relief in that. The human suffering is horrible, and we have, the Prophet said, "Ad-du'a silah al-mu'min," and that's real. You should believe that. Prayer is, that's the real weapon. But we can't despair. We're the people of الرجاء لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. We have our hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I just want to see peace. I just don't want to see more human suffering. But وَإِن مِّن قَرْيَةٍ إِلَّا نَحْنُ مُعَذِّبُوهَا قبل يوم القيامة مهلكوها قبل اليوم القيامة أو معذبوها عذابا شديدا. That's something in Surah Al-Isra. It's just the heart of the Qur'an. You know, Surah Bani Israel is at the heart of the Qur'an. It's the 15th juz. You know, and these people, you know, you just have to say, MashaAllah. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a relationship with them. Difficult to understand, but MashaAllah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of my sheikhs, he said to me, Ada bainahum wa bain Allah. It's just between them and God. It's something between them and God. So, but we've been their protectors. The Muslims always protected them. They fled to the Muslim countries. The Moroccans have a great tradition of taking in the Jews. Muhammad al-Khamis, Allah yarhamuhu, he protected them. He gave them citizenship. He gave them, you know, cards that said they were Muslims, so they wouldn't be taken by the Germans. I actually met the Imam in the 70s. The Imam, because I visited the Imam in Paris, that was built by the French government in honor of all the Algerians and Moroccans that died in World War I for them. That's why they built that masjid. Well, that masjid hid all these Jews. The Imam there, he hid the Jews. They were hidden in the cellars and fed them at the risk of their own lives. Or the Albanians that hid the Jews. Musha bin Mamun. He wrote in Arabic. He's one of their greatest scholars, Rambam. He's one of their greatest scholars. He wrote in Arabic. With Hebrew script, he wrote in Arabic. Arabic's a richer language for their metaphysics. It's a richer language. They learned dictionaries from the Muslims. They learned arud from the Muslims. They learned philosophy from the Muslims. The single most important book that they had for learning philosophy at one stage was Maqasid al-Falasifa, which was translated into Hebrew. And Chernoff, the first head of Homeland Security, his father, and I read his dissertation at Columbia University on the influence of al-Ghazali on medieval Jewish tradition. That's what his dissertation was. And they know who the Muslims are. I mean, one rabbi said, oh, Mamdani, his Marxism is from Islam because Islam doesn't believe in private property. Why would you tell a lie like that? Why would you do that? لا يحقن المكر السيء إلا بأهله. You know, it's just, it's not right. And in any case, mashallah, qadar Allah, mashallah. We have the book of Allah, and the best thing that we can do in these times is, the Prophet said, when Sayyidina Ali asked him, he said, "Fitnun ka qat' al-layl al-mudrim." You know, there's going to be fitan, like just portions of a dark black night. He said, "Ma al-khalasu yawma idhin ya Rasulullah." He said, "Kitab Allah," the book of Allah. And that's the truth. And Muslims should you know, learn this book again, study it, because everything's in there. If you want to understand this world, it's in there. It's not easily accessible because أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. You have to think deeply about this book. Allah's not just giving it to you. There has to be some effort. You have to work for it. This is why Allah gave us this intellect. That's why He gave us intellect. But we have to work.